Downforce, at the time I suppose most engineers didn't think we would ever get it back, but we've got it back and we've increased the levels of downforce to levels unimaginable back in those days.
They've done it by paying attention to every fine detail in wind tunnel testing.
There's various aspects of this car, each of them may only add up to 2 or 3 kilos of downforce, but when you've got 100 or 200 fine areas of detail added up, that's hundreds of kilos of downforce.
Maximum downforce requires high pressure above the car or component and low pressure beneath. Red indicates high air pressure and blue low pressure, in this simulation by Advantage CFD.
The CFD stands for Computational Fluid Dynamics, and it's basically simulating a car and simulating air flowing over that car on a simulated test track or even in a simulated wind tunnel.
These equations to show fluid flow were written in Victorian times. They were too long and complicated to use until computers came along.
The computer solves millions of equations to give us some kind of visualization results. We can look at the configuration of the car, so we can see if the rear wing and the front wing are set up correctly to give the maximum downforce.
To complement wind tunnel research, every Formula One team uses CFD simulation.
Where they're heading is to be able to have 2 cars in that simulation and possibly one overtaking the other.
This will help drivers anticipate when to come out of the slipstream to overtake. Advances in aerodynamic design have made cars faster. But changes to the shape of the car have also obliged designers and engineers to look for new construction materials. By 1980, cars had become far more aerodynamically efficient. But to get good airflow low down, they'd also become narrower and less strong.
So I started thinking, how do I get this strength back? I want it small, I want it narrow down there, but I don't want to give up strength. So then I started thinking, okay, maybe we have to change materials.
Up to now, cars had been made of steel and aluminium. Visiting a British aerospace factory, Barnard saw engine panels being made of carbon fibre.
It was enough to give me the idea that here was a material that had all the right answers. It was very light. You could make it very strong or very stiff, whatever you wanted, just by how you put together the carbon fibres.
Returning to his office at McLaren, Barnard had a brilliant idea. He would build the very first racing car monocoque made entirely of carbon fibre composite.
And so I sat down and started working on the carbon fibre monocoque, which became the McLaren MP41.
Barnard set a pattern that is now universal in Formula One, and the use of carbon fibre hasn't stopped at the monocoque. Excluding the engine, 80% of today's Formula One car is built of carbon.
With carbon, you can vary the characteristics, which means that you can make very lightweight, very thin bodywork, or you can make enormously strong components like gearbox cases and suspension, so the adaptability is its key.
There's another reason carbon fibre has taken over from steel and aluminium in the building of a Formula One car.
This wishbone, which is part of the suspension system holding the wheel on, is from about 93, 94, handmade in steel, hand welded. If we put that on the scale, we can see that we've got a shade over 1.3 kilos. If we now pick up a carbon fibre wishbone, like this would be circa about 2000, 2001, we can see that the fittings now are in titanium. The main part of the wishbone is in carbon, and if we put that on the scale, we've got a shade under 0.6 kilos. So that's about 40% of the weight of the original steel component.
With around 3,000 components on a Formula One car, excluding the engine, the weight-saving benefits of carbon are huge. But when John Barnard launched the first ever car with a carbon fibre monocoque in 1981, people had doubts about how the new Wonder material would stand up in a high-speed crash.
There were a lot of comments about, wait till it hits something, you'll just see a cloud of black dust. In fact, what happened in the first year of running the carbon fibre monocoque, John Watson, through a driver error, it must be said, went off the road in Monza, travelling at high speed, probably 170, 180 miles an hour, and completely lost it. Came back on the road, went across the track and smashed into the Armco on the other side of the road. Now the effect was that it actually ripped the engine off the back of the monocoque. And it was very dramatic because the oil tank cracked and some oil went on the exhaust and there was a flash fire and so on. And everybody went, oh my God, that's it. When all the dust settled, Watson just unbuckled his belts and stepped out of this carbon monocoque, which was completely intact and in fact had worked brilliantly as a safety cell.
But John Barnard admits that driver safety was not uppermost in his mind when he built a car out of carbon.
Driver safety, in terms of the design of the car, probably came somewhere down the list. As a designer, you're not going to be the only one to have a fantastically safe car and be the slowest one on the grid. Performance was number one.
But striving for performance can sometimes lead to disaster. And in recent years, regulations have obliged designers to move safety steadily up the list.
When you see a racing car crash, quite often you see what seem to be fairly large lumps come off the car. Now, the anomaly is that from a driver's point of view, most times that's a good thing. If when he hits, he rips his wheels off, A, he's taking energy out of the impact, and B, he's removing what could be a dangerous item in terms of damage to him.
Ridding the car of dangerous items is a design priority. It's meant thinking outside the envelope to find new ways of constructing components.
These pieces illustrate the process used in making a Formula One nose cone. We start here with this piece made from solid aluminium, pocketed out to remove some weight, still very heavy. From that we make a carbon mould, because this is what we want on the outside of the nose cone. We then make the outer skin, which is very thin, can deflect this quite easily. Inside that outer skin we fit lightweight aluminium honeycomb core, and eventually we end up with this. So if we look inside this nose cone, we can see, all we see is carbon skin, but in fact between there and there is a honeycomb core like that. But fundamentally that has to take the crash test.
When John Barnard built the first carbon fibre monocoque in the 1980s, he chose the new Wonder material because it was light and strong. But over the years, it's also shown itself to be remarkably safe because it crumples. And as it crumples, it absorbs energy.
The objective in all these crash tests is to absorb energy, to break up all the little pieces of carbon. The nearer you can get to making your component into a pile of black dust, the more energy you've absorbed.
That's the theory. But how does it work in practice? This is the JF14, the latest state-of-the-art Jordan car. But like every new Formula One car, it will have to pass a series of crash tests before it's allowed to race. So, how will it do? On the test rig, first the nose cone, then the side impact bars, and finally the rear crash structure are all impacted to simulate the huge forces the car would be subjected to in a high-speed crash. Its carbon fibre components have done their job. Jordan's new car has successfully passed its impact tests and is ready to compete in the new Grand Prix season. The use of carbon fibre composite has played a revolutionary role in making the racing car significantly safer. But has it brought the world's most highly engineered racing machine closer to the ultimate?
People have often asked me what I think the ultimate racing car is. It's almost impossible because everything that races today is raced to some sort of regulation.
There's very few limits to how fast we could drive without regulations. We could probably double or treble the downforce within a matter of months. We could take a lot of weight out of the car, change the wheelbase, reducing lap times by tens of seconds without too much difficulty very quickly.
A Formula One world without regulation would certainly be an exciting place. But would it be worth the price?
Touch wood, I'm very lucky and can say that I've never had a driver killed in one of my cars. I know I've had one or two big accidents, and the effect as the prime mover in the design of that car is fundamental, certainly to me, and I would have thought twice about carrying on if something had happened. To say throw away the regulations and build whatever you want is a sort of impossible situation, really. So I'm not sure that the ultimate racing car has been built, and I'm not sure it can be built.
But as long as men continue